So my name is Anna Robinson, and I am a member in the team behind the Petardy Historic Landscape Project, PHLP. And it's a student-led project studying occupational and environmental developments in East Fife. Today, I'm going to be giving you a broad overview of this project, first going over who we are, then discussing the historical background of the research area and previous archaeological projects, then why we started our project, our past seasons, and importantly, the ways in which we seek to reflect the needs and interests of community members and students. Awesome. The team is comprised of 3 undergraduates at the University of St. Andrews. That is Christopher Noss, myself, and Joe Lippett, as well as Eric Srinkovich, a graduate from St. Andrews who is now at Cambridge. Our research area, you can see here on the right, and is within the bounds of Pittarthie Farm, which is outlined in the map, and that's in the middle of the East-Neuk of Fife. Very hard to get to by public transportation, just a note. Our primary objectives are to investigate and record archaeological and paleo-environmental remains in the research area in a capacity that supports local and national research frameworks. Specifically, our research aims are to locate, date, and understand the history of the Pittarthie landscape, that is the environmental and the anthropological landscape, as well as better understand the relationship between human occupation and the environment in Central East Fife. So the historical background of the research area could be well over a 20-minute talk unto itself. So while I will be as brief as possible in order to dedicate more time to the archaeological section, I believe it's very important to include it to the extent that I have, as both it is critical to understanding the relevancy of the archaeology, and the methods of PHLP are just as research and archive-based as they are archaeologically based. So you might have noticed that the Petardy project studies the Pittarthie farm. This difference in name is correlated to the evolution that the name of the research area takes over time. The first historical mention of the area comes in 1375 as Pittardy. Doing some linguistics, Pittardy is a conjunction of the Pictish word pet, which means something along the lines of a unit of land, and the Gaelic word ard, meaning roughly a high place. Thus, Pittardy implies something near the high unit of land or the place on the hill, which makes a lot of sense because if you can make out the topographical lines on the map to the right here, you can see that there is significant topographical variation in the landscape area, the highest points of which provide the viewer with extensive vantages of the North Sea from the north to the southeast, the highlands to the northwest, and the sprawl of Fife from the west to the south. There is limited material from prehistory, that is before 1375, but there are finds, and those include Neolithic flints, arrowheads, and notably 2 mica quernstones. These are focused around the Craigloon farmstead, highlighted here on the right, but flints can be found across the research area. So the medieval period is where activity really begins to pick up on the farm. King Robert II of Scotland grants William Strang the right to pasture livestock in 1375. The primary material evidence of this period is in the form of white gritty-ware, which is medieval ceramics, though other finds, such as a fragment of a sword pommel, suggest a period of high status development in the 13th to 14th centuries. To the right here is just an example of a white gritty-ware pot from East Lothian, and these sorts of fragments are exactly what we find on Pittarthie Farm. In the late and post-medieval period, the landscape is increasingly developed, with the most notable developments being the construction of the Tower House in the late 16th century. The remains of the Tower House as they exist today can be seen in the photograph to the right, which views the building from the east-southeast. The Tower House, which is referred to as Pittarthie Castle, was expanded and its formal terraced gardens built around 1698, but by the time of the first OS map of the area, which doesn't come until 1853 unfortunately, the castle is noted as a roofless ruin. Because of this, it is likely that occupation ended in the early part of the 19th century. Finally, in the modern period, the research area exists comparably to the way it does today, with a farmstead at Craigloon in the 18th or 19th centuries, and anti-aircraft guns installed during World War II east of the Tower House. On the farm's archaeological history, while historical finds have been abundant throughout its occupation, only 2 official external excavations have taken place. Notable finds, though, both of which have been mentioned, are 2 half-meter crownstones in 1995, and the fragmented pommel of a 13th to 14th century sword, suggested to be portraying the arms of Edmund, Earl of Cornwall, which is really far away, so it's very strange that his sword pommel is showing up. Last time I gave this talk, someone called out my flint hand axe. I don't know if it was just bringing attention to it because it was published in the DES in 1997, or if there was an actual error. So if that was you and you know there's an error, please let me know so I can fix that and not propagate whatever misinformation I might be. Okie dokie. So the aims and interests, now that you have a better gauge of the historical weight of the research area, let's just refresh why we're here and what our research aims are. Pittarthie Farm presents a rich research area with an extensive breadth and density of material evidence, as well as a wealth of structural and preserved features and numerous unidentified sites, which is very exciting as researchers. Again, our aims are to better understand the research area's chronological and environmental history, especially in the relationship between human occupation and the environment, and how that relates to the wider context of the research area, which is East-Neuk, Fife, and Scotland. With that established, I want to discuss what PHLP has done thus far, that is, seasons 1 and 2. So, season 1 began in the autumn of 2020 as an extensive fieldwalking-based survey of as much of the research area as possible. It was pretty much all you could do in autumn of 2020, so that was one of the motivating factors. At the same time, Professor Richard Bates of the University of St. Andrews began an electromagnetic survey of the area. Excavation took place during summer 2021, led by Eric Strinkovich, Joe Lippett, and Christopher Noss. I was unfortunately stuck in the States because of lockdown, but they had a very successful excavation season. The goals this season were to investigate and clarify visual and/or known features. So after this extensive field walking, the excavation focused on 4 main areas. These sites were distributed across the farm at Q1 in the northeast by the castle, J1 in the southwest at the edge of Craigloon, J8 just to the east of J1 on the Craigloon Plateau, and J4, roughly at the center of the research area, along a burn in the ravine that defines the northeast boundaries of Craigloon. Just let everyone appreciate that for a moment. Awesome. So what were the results of the first season beyond serving as a very strong foundation for future seasons? Field walking produced 466 total finds, primarily in the form of medieval white griddyware and modern porcelain, with some flints and metal finds, such as fragments of brooches or pins. The most notable finds include clear evidence of sustained burning and a stone feature in J4, and importantly, in Q1, a metalled road and a cobbled feature with evidence of metalworking. These finds indicate that there was substantial activity around the 14th century, much more than was expected from a pre-Tower House landscape, or even than would likely be produced from there only being some comparable central structure in this period. Furthermore, as roads tend to lead from one place to another, it's highly probable that the Q1 road relates the Tower House to the wider landscape. Finally, as excavations at J1 and J8, they provide firm evidence that there was an 18th to 19th century farmhouse at Craigloon, which there was otherwise very little evidence for. So that was a very exciting conclusion to draw. Now, season 2. This took place in July 2022, focused around Q1, with Eric and Joe directing continued excavations of the metalled road found in the previous season and its surrounding contexts. I was in the Tower House leading a drawn and photographic survey, And Christopher was in the gardens directing geophysical survey with supplement from me in the same area, conducting a drone survey. I think it's probably quite clear to everyone in the room, just from this cursory aerial photograph, that there's really quite a lot going on in these gardens. Again, it's worth noting that they're terraced, and the bottom line here is a very sharp drop-off. That is the last terrace within this enclosed area, although it's almost definite that the gardens themselves extend beyond their modern boundaries. It's just where the farmers decided to put fences in over the centuries. But it's a very exciting site. So Season's 2 goals was to investigate the metalled road and its construction in order to better understand its chronology, its context, and its extent, and importantly, its relationship with the wider landscape. If you're not brushed up on your Scottish road building history, it could reveal that the area held particular significance, as cobbled roads in rural areas were very uncommon until the early modern period, and this road had suggestions of being older. This season, that is the 2022 season, our volunteers included undergraduates, postgraduates, and community members, which is a really great mix of experience and expertise. For the survey in Season 2, again, I was in the castle conducting a drawn and photographic architectural survey in order to supplement research frameworks and the very sparse records of the building, especially as it continues to decline. The geophysical survey of the castle's terraced gardens were done by Christopher Nass using resistivity. And I spent the back half of the season in the gardens with Christopher conducting a drawn survey of the area. These both, like the castle survey, are supplementing the few to no records of the gardens, while also paving way for future excavations. So, publication is forthcoming for the Season 2 results, but the trench in Q1, which again was investigating the road, was incredibly slag-rich, with very little other types of finds, which was both fascinating and a bit frustrating because we were looking for hard dating evidence, and we didn't get it, as far as I know. On the right here, you can see our beautiful road about 3/4 of the way through excavation. The garden surveys are revealing far more man-made features than were known and or visible, and are significantly refining our images of what is still visible on the surface. Finally, the architectural chronologies revealed in the castle survey, which is my pet project. I'm very passionate about it. I could probably talk about those for 20 minutes as well, and I won't. But they suggest a condensed period of very significant social change. So, Season 3. It's coming up this summer and will take place between 19th June and 14th July. This season, we will be excavating the eastern strip of the castle gardens, which is the unscheduled portion of the garden. If any HES folks are in the room and we're concerned we were planning criminal activity, we're not yet. This spring, we completed the geophysical survey of the entire garden, which is about 1.3 square kilometers, if I remember correctly. So that was a real accomplishment for us, especially as half of us were finishing dissertations. So as that data gets processed, we are very excited to develop a clear image of what's going on in the area. These garden excavations will contribute to our understanding of the garden's archaeology and its geology, which will really help clarify any geophysical data that's been taken in the past. And it'll begin to paint an informed image of the material around the castle. In essence, the goal of this season's excavations is to investigate the material and environmental remains of the eastern gardens, to supplement the obscured narrative of the castle, and to set the stage for potential excavations of the scheduled portion of the gardens at some point in the future. This season, we're also looking to continue non-intrusive surveys around the backside of the castle, and to refine last year's drawn survey. A trend that is likely apparent from these season overviews is that the castle grabbed our attention more and more. The archaeology and the literature surrounding the area all point to the castle as holding social significance in the region, even after it loses political relevancy into the 18th century. It has become clear to us as researchers that the castle is a sort of crystallization of the region's transition from the late medieval world to the modern world. Its failure to successfully transform from a medieval seat of regional power to a modern mansion, and then its relative lack of development in subsequent centuries has furnished it as an excellent case study for this transitional period and the social forces that so drastically shaped the Fife and Scotland that we know today. As the Petardy Historic Landscape Project has grown, especially in this past year, we have been able to better reflect the interests of Scottish archaeology and national frameworks. Further, the project has better developed and refined its engagement and accessibility of the community and students who otherwise face difficulty in gaining archaeological experience, or as many of the talks today have addressed, understanding what archaeology is and how it's relevant to their community and their connections with it. So first of all, we are by nature a community archaeology project. Participation is open to people of all academic, professional, and personal backgrounds. We are making an effort to start advertising the project with not just universities and schools, but community-oriented archaeology initiatives as well. We've just started our conversations with Diggit, and that's been an absolute pleasure. We're very excited to see where that takes the conversation around the project. And we're doing this to best reach those who'd be interested in volunteering. However, the community element is not restricted to those who would contribute to the research, that is, just on who comes along to help, but rather, we make an effort to investigate the material that is relevant and important to the lived experiences of the area and the people who call it home. We hope that in the coming years, as we transition to a new phase of the project that is more intimately entwined with the monument of the Pittarthie Castle, we will contribute to the narrative of Scotland's medieval and early modern character with our own small piece of the story. To ensure that our work towards this image is both accessible and led by the community, led by their expertise and endemic knowledge of the area, we're interested in expanding the content of our website, holding more community events during the excavation season and beyond. We have 2 planned for the season, which will be advertised by Diggit and by us at certain levels, so we'd love to see many of you come along, learn more about our site. And we'd like to engage more with our mailing list and, importantly, establish a social media presence. We've just created a Facebook page for the project, which, beyond serving as a resource for people to get engaged with us more, we also think it's very important to have a platform in which community members who aren't necessarily in the academic community, know where to look in academic publications, can still access our content, our research, our findings in a friendly way. And it's easier to share things with their family or with their children, for example. So we want to effectively allow people to access the information about their community in the easiest way possible for them. So the Petardy Historic Landscape Project started in part as a response to the lack of accessible opportunities for archaeology students in Scotland to gain hands-on field experience. Many universities require that students get so many weeks of fieldwork before graduating, and for some students that is either too expensive or they just simply cannot spare weeks far away, especially on the east coast of Scotland. They can't necessarily go to the west coast for 3 weeks. They have to have a job, you know? And that was a problem that we were facing at St. Andrews and why we started this project. We keep participation costs as low as we can, only £15 per week to volunteer, and we provide equipment to prevent finances from being a barrier keeping a student from the field. We also endeavor to provide skill instruction to all our volunteers and thus not discriminate in assigning responsibilities and the gaining of technical experience to those who had the chance to conduct fieldwork in the past. We have over 30 students signed up to volunteer with us this season. We have a good handful, about 10 community members signed up. This is the biggest group we've ever had, and it's really, really exciting to us because we're finally getting into the gardens where we think we're going to have the most interesting archaeology. So we're quite thrilled and very pleased that students find us interesting. That was the goal. These are undergraduates, but they're all the way up to postgraduates, people who have recently graduated, with a wide range of archaeological experience. There are some folks who were with us every day for 4 weeks last year, and some people who are going to be stepping foot into the field for the very first time. There are folks working for a degree in archaeology, of course, but we also have students in earth sciences, sustainable development, history, and biology. In essence, our goal is to conduct the research that is of an interest to the community while making it easy for community members and students to gain experience in archaeology without the barriers of cost, location, and requirements that typically hinder them. So just to finish up, my team and I give our endless thanks to Patrick Douglas and Angus Bowden-Smith for their continuous support in their stewardship of the lands of Pittarthie Farm. We also send our deepest acknowledgements to Professor Richard Bates and Mr. Tom Dawson at St. Andrews, Professor Rebecca Sweetman at the British School of Athens, and Mr. Derek Hall for their continued expertise and time. Thanks to the University of St. Andrews and School of Classics. And finally, our sincere thanks to the Society of Antiquaries and for Archaeology Scotland for inviting me to speak today and getting to speak to all of you, and to everyone who has helped make today happen. So thank you very much.